Thank you everyone for joining today. Welcome to the Patient Engagement Open Forum organized by PFMD, UPATI, and EPF. Today's session is titled Towards Harmonized Global Principles for Remunerating the Patient Community for Interactions with Pharmaceutical Industry. I'm Nicole Wicki. I'm a program manager with PFMD, and I'll be kicking things off today. Next slide, please. The Patient Engagement Forum is a series of virtual events where we work together in a multi-stakeholder context towards stronger patient engagement. The sessions of the PE Open Forum provide a holistic perspective of patient engagement, the landscape, the actors, and foster collaboration and co-creation while breaking down fragmentation in patient engagement work. Next slide. So just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. So we kindly ask you to be engaged and present with us this afternoon. I realize it's getting late in the day for those of us in Europe, but bear with us. Your microphones will be muted, but please provide any questions or comments using the Q&A function. And please note that the session will be recorded and that the recording of the session will also be available following the session. Next slide. So, and a reminder that the Q&A function is found on your Zoom menu. So when you pose a question in the Q&A, it will show your name next to the question that you've put in. So, and please take a look and be sure that your question hasn't already been asked, and feel free to upvote a question that you agree with, or if it's similar to one that you've had in mind. We may or may not be able to respond to each question live today, but we may be able to follow up with you afterwards. Okay, great. So today's session, I'll begin with an introduction to the Patient Engagement, Remuneration, and Fair Market Value Project. I'll then hand over to Sarunas, who'll provide an overview of the global principles for remunerating the patient community for interactions with the pharmaceutical industry. We'll then hear from Kay and Mark, who'll provide their reflections on the global principles from their perspectives. And then for the remainder of the session, Laura will talk us through the public consultation on the global principles, and we'll facilitate an interactive activity to gather your feedback and some of your impressions. Okay, we can go ahead to the next one. So the Patient Engagement, Remuneration, and Fair Market Value Project is led by a wonderful steering committee with representatives from the patient community and the pharmaceutical industry. So they each bring unique expertise and experience to the project, and the steering committee is working to co-develop the deliverables within this project, building on best practices. Next one. So in recent years, there's been substantial collaborative work to enable ethical and compliant interactions between patient community and the pharmaceutical industry. However, fair remuneration continues to be a tension point. So there's a need for clearly defined, fair, equitable, and ethical global approach to remuneration that's co-created, mutually agreed, really ensuring transparency and consistency. So there's a solid foundation to draw from in co-developing a global framework, and we're harmonizing and building on these key good practices towards our project deliverables. The key deliverables will be co-created in stages and include the global principles, which is the focus for our session today, and also the stepwise co-development of a global methodology for and process for determining fair market value. So this will start with defining activities, the expertise required, and participant types. And then these definitions will outline a market approach for activity profile matching to determine appropriate market rates. And then eventually the methodology can be applied in the development of a fair market value calculator tool. The initial scope of this would be for Europe and a couple additional countries. That will be work that will take place into next year. Okay, so here you have a high-level timeline of our project. So as I mentioned, the project's taking a stepwise approach to progressing the deliverables The work began with an extensive review of existing resources, interviews with PFMD partners to really understand current approaches to remuneration and fair market value. And as the work has progressed iteratively with the steering committee, the agile timelines allow time to hear from you on all things that are available to be consulted on. Integrating public consultation in our deliverables will ensure representativeness of all communities, help drive adoption, and stimulate systematic change. So all the while, we're also consulting with industry associations as well. So this is a complex project, and we're going to approach it in stages, as I said. But the global principles are the fundamental basis to our work on this project, and this is really our focus for today. And so I'll now hand over to Sarunas, who's going to walk us through the principles and how they've been co-developed.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Šarūnas Narbutas. I'm a patient advocate. Also, I'm a lawyer by background, so I'm helping here as an internal member of PFMD to be part of this project. And particularly, I have a lot of previous experiences that would, amount to hundreds of interactions with pharmaceutical companies where we were seeing when I am active at a national level, which is Lithuania, or at European level or international level, because I get 3 separate patient organizations at national, regional, and global level, there is always lack of clarity how to define rules of engagement, if you may. So sometimes, pharmaceutical companies have no template agreement that they can send to a patient advocate for whatever activity to be engaged of. Sometimes, we are just getting adaptations for healthcare professional agreements. Sometimes, it's one shoe fits all approach where the same agreement for global activities, let's say meeting with a pharmaceutical company's board, is used for some local activities. And of course, all of that does not make sense. So that is why a part of this project were to standardize and have a template of what could be a principles, not a legal document, that should be applicable globally. So I will explain a bit how we arrived into the process where we are today and why we are discussing today and going for this public consultation where we proactively seek your input. And just before I go, feel free to ask any clarifying questions in the chat or Q&A. In the chats, we'll try to respond, faster. In Q&A, I think we'll take those questions a bit later because we have some Slido questions to you as well. But we'll try to answer all of them to the best of our abilities during the session. So next slide, please. Here it provides a background why this part of the global principles is important, why it's needed, and what are the stepping stones, what we started to arrive at the point where we are today. So the global principles and the work of this project as a whole draws on previous activities where you can see above, which is about early insight gathering to understand the breadth of patient engagement activities and the challenges, also complexity of all of the legal and compliance environment, relationships between pharma and patient community. And this process was informed by 2 collaborative surveys of a patient community focusing on legal agreements and fair market value. When we saw there is a gap in that work that was done before, there was a need to define a clear, transparent, equitable principles focused on remuneration that are co-created and mutually agreed from the industry and between the industry and the patient community. And by harmonizing the existing collaborative work, we already looked into the work that has been done before. And so we look into already, let's say, an ecosystem of good practice principles and guidance, where you can see the 4 documents shown below. So you have the National Health Council in US, principles for compensating patients for patient engagement activities, which was, of course, created in the National Health Council Multi-Stakeholder Steering Committee. Then we have a regional principles which are applicable in European Union, developed through FPA, which is European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industry Associations, and which is called, as you see, Working Together with Patients, which was developed not by the industry, but by FPA patient think tank, meaning there is an equal number of patient representatives and industry representatives in that committee. And then there was a separate activity, the guiding principles on legal agreements developed jointly by WeCan, and WeCan is a work group of European Cancer Advocacy Network, still the same European focus, which has members who are disease-specific umbrella organizations at European level, MPE, Myeloma Patients Europe, and PFMD. So the current environment we're meeting to define further, what are the principles to be included in legal agreements. And then we have a global document, as you see, by International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, and their note of guidance on patient and patient organization interactions. So this was a work that we looked into before of what is already a good practice standard available and being applied at national, regional, and global level. But we saw there's also a number of discrepancies. There are some things that don't overlap, or that they have, of course, sometimes different type of application for the same principles, sometimes because of the different local regulations. Well, think in US, it is allowed to have direct-to-consumer advertising, whereas in Europe, it's not. So, of course, the rules will be different. And hence, this is where this project comes in, because we try to harmonize that existing best practice and to have a one set of the global principles that would be applicable at a global level, as well as regional level, and as well as national level. So please go to the next slide. So that's how we got to the point where we are today. The process of drafting and co-creating the global principles consisted of identifying these existing good practices that I've mentioned in the previous slide. And this was based on the feedback from PFMD members on the existing principles that we try to scope to see whether we have missed anything or not. And then the 4 documents were reviewed, outlined to check which areas are being covered, what are the exceptions, what could be the scope, is the scope broader or more restrictive than presented in those documents. And from there, a harmonized draft was created and iteratively co-created through what you see on the right, this process where there was a review, consensus, consolidation, refining the version, which is currently going into a public consultation. How it was done, as you see, the drafting was done by our team of 4 that Nicole presented, but we have a steering committee that also Nicole shown, consisting of industry representatives, PFMD members, as well as patient organization representatives, PFMD members. And this is where we then asked the input, not just from the steering committee, but also from the organizations they represent. And they went through 2 rounds of revising that draft principles document before going to you and showing what it is today. And as you see, we've received over 100 comments that were incorporated, and in some occasions where we thought, the comments did not reflect the logic of what is being created in the document, or something is out of scope. This is where we created a consensus document, which will be part of the toolkit that will be explained later on, essentially saying if there was a very good argument raised or asking for practical applications, how to interpret certain principle, we not always saw it where it is fit to put it in a principles file, because it might be out of scope. It might, just speak to the different level of granularity. If you have one sentence provision in the respective section and the reasoning would be half a page, we don't want, to create a new Bible while working on the global principles. But that document is available. We will be adding comments to it based on also the public consultation. So what is important is that the same co-creation approach that we used to get the input and feedback from PFMD members will be used in the public consultation process right now, but also to the project as a whole, because the project is broader than what we are talking today. And Laura will speak later to those sections, that this is not end of the road to agree on global principles, but that we'll also need to identify the methodology and how we will create a fair market calculator. But this is like an overarching document that needs to be aligned first before we go in the next stage, the same as Nicole has shown in that inverted pyramid slide. Next slide, please. So I will not be going through each section of the document today. You will get the links to access it during the public consultation. That's why you will have the time until beginning of November to go through this and look deeper. But there is just to explain a bit of the structure of the document so that it would be clear and not just written for the lawyers or the legal and compliance people inside the industry to understand, but most importantly, that the patient community would be able to understand it. And when we speak to the patient community, we mean like this principle should apply for engagement with individual patients who are not affiliated with any organization, with the carers, with patient advocates, with patient organization representatives, and etc. So it is not about how you engage patient organizations per se. There are other documents to do so, and sponsorships, grants, donation type of agreements in place. Here we are speaking how industry would engage natural persons, individuals, and not the organizations to be involved in various activities throughout life cycle of medicine R&D, but also broader than that, including the strategic discussions. So you have a purpose of the document explaining, of course, why it's needed, why what I was explaining to you in several minutes, it's just a few paragraphs outlining how we got to the stage where we are. Scope of the principles saying that exactly what I said, this applies to the patient community, who is part of patient community and interactions with pharmaceutical companies. So currently it's not intended to apply, let's say that HTA agencies would use it, or regulators, or medtech companies. It is down the line in the plans for PFMD, but let's first agree on the things we can agree and see how then we can use these global principles to build on the future initiatives on. Then we have this third part, core principles, which is 14 principles. We'll have another slide to explain that, but let's not go there. So this is a meat of all of the content, why we are including something. Again, as I explained, we did not create every section or principle from scratch. We looked in these 4 documents that were created, NHC, FPA, WCAN, IFPMA, and try to align the clauses, try to combine them. We did not add a single thing which was not referenced there, but through the comments, through reiteration, there was some amendments added to it. Then it is explaining the types of participants, and these are the types of patients or carers that might be engaged, expertise, and types of activities. So these part 5 and part 6 of the document is not yet developed. This will be a part of the next stage, something that Laura will allude to. because we need to explain, how the expertise is being defined, what type of expertise is needed to be engaged in the activity, and what type of participant you need for each activity. And we need all of that in order to be able to know which market rate are we using, because the central principle where the steering committee, where all of the rounds of comments revolved about, that we are not just reusing healthcare professionals as a reference to calculate fair market value rates. This is a process just started de novo. So do it based, if we see that expertise, something like market research or communication activities, it's not closely linked to what nurse or healthcare or the doctors are doing. It might be closer to what other industries are doing across different ecosystems, not just healthcare. So we know what rates are there, and we'll be able to go for external service provider to get those rates, and then see how to incorporate this in the calculator. But that is not the topic for today, not the topic for the session. There will be sessions addressing the feedback and the public consultation on these elements later down the line. Now we are discussing more about the core principles, and the current version, which is already refined after receiving this over 100 comments, that will be sent for your review. Next slide. Here we see the last, well, that's the last slide of my presentation, but you see the 14 principles, how they are worded. Again, we don't have time in the session to go through separate principle and look into content. That is part of the links that you will see also later in this presentation that you can access and read yourself. There is also a survey that you will be asked to complete, saying whether each of this principle is worded in a way that makes sense, is understandable, it's you're able to make action based on this, or if something needs to be improved further on. And that is also building on these 4 documents that I repeat were reviewed and saw how to put them together to not overlap but complement each other. If you would see some particular principle is still missing, like we should include it, please propose it during the that phase. So it is not like it is just the minor tweaks are accepted. We are really open ears. However, be mindful that also it would be good for you to look this consensus document that I've said that would explain. Sometimes people were suggesting to compile sections together into one, like maybe payment terms and reimbursement is one. We provide the reasoning why it serves a different purpose, why it's not a good idea to do so in our opinion. Or in other words, if you see like something should be included in the principles, then see if that was not addressed yet in the consensus document. And yeah, we agree that there might be elements we have not thought about that they may be added. So, we may end up with 20 principles or whatnot. So the way that we see it structured, and we looked at for different elements, not just through, let's take a single interaction from the patient with pharmaceutical companies, but to look into different type of stakeholders, how they would approach, how they would perceive it. So for instance, also how the regulatory agencies would see that interaction between the patient and community. Hence, we have a transparency and conflict of interest principles. Also to reporting information that might be impacting the tax status or social benefit status. So we have this principles also included within the consistency about engagement should not be non-promotional and etc. So I will be glad actually to take on any question, and we could then pull up, let's say, the text and look at it if you think that is needed in the session. But again, you will receive a toolbox which includes not just the text and you don't know what to do with it, but it includes the explanation how to read the text, what is included at which section. You will be asked to complete the survey and provide your feedback. So we try to collect your feedback in a way which would not take too much of your time, but that would, if you want, still allow for the discussions inside your organizations, or if you are not affiliated with one and are here as an expert or as a member of patient community, you can just provide individual feedback by completing the surveys. So this is where I stop. More on the process will be explained later by Laura, but now I will invite also the two members of the steering committee to provide their perspective of why this current exercise is important. So we will have an industry perspective, which is Kay Warner, Senior Director in the patient-focused development team from GSK, and then we'll have a patient representative, Mark. Mark will show 2 slides as a patient advocacy perspective representing UPATI here. So I stop here, and Kay, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarunas. Very nice introduction to the global principles. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So I was asked to provide reflections from an industry point of view. So as Sarunas says, I'm a member of the Working Party alongside other members of industry, and I'm representing GSK as well on this call today. Also a co-chair of UPATI. I've been involved in UPATI since 2012. So fair market value has been a really key issue for many years. I mean, I recall it coming up frequently in UPATI and the Paradigm Project, and it was, an issue raised by numerous stakeholders at that time, and it's continued to be an issue that really needs solving. And I think I can see from the chat already today that people are saying this is wonderful. It's really good to see this being addressed. I believe every pharma company has struggled with this in one degree or another. I found that there's a lack of external benchmarking around fair market value for patients, and so the industry consequently really struggles to set the rates. I also remember back in the summer of last year at the Patient Engagement Open Forum, the NHC, the National Health Council, launching their fair market value calculator, and really seeing the chats light up with interest on having something like this for Europe. So really the demand is there. And for me, that really sets the ambition for the work that Sarunas and others will outline on the call today, and what is going to be described in this session. For patients and industry to co-create global principles like those that have been addressed today for fair market value is an important start, and looks to address the particular tensions around transparency, equity and ethics that have already been raised through my colleagues. And we are just at the start. This is stage 1. The global principles will lay the foundation for the calculator, which will come much later. And I think it's really important to recognise, and all of us recognise, that it will take time to do this well. This is a very complex piece of work. The 14 principles really give practical consideration and to encourage a harmonised best practice. And I think Sarunas has really outlined that very well already. And the value added is that they will draw on previous work completed by FPR, the NHC and PFMD. Bringing all those elements together in one document is absolutely critical. The document includes only a few examples in order to keep the document brief and succinct. The major suggestions will be included in the consensus document and cover more practical situations. So as Sarunas has said, really important to read that alongside the guiding principles. Gaining consensus is critical to ensure that the global principles are fit for purpose, with the aim of reducing perceived barriers to patient engagement. And these global principles will empower the patient community to advocate for themselves when it comes to remuneration for patient engagement activities. And consequently, companies won't have to go this alone. There's the potential really here to update existing codes of conduct that we all abide by. And as I mentioned, it will take time to develop a calculator. It involves complexity because the methodology required. A topic as complex as this also requires a really good collaborative approach, aligned with global principles that can be an enabler for patient engagement and facilitate internal collaboration among various functions internally within companies, such as legal and compliance. And for industry colleagues in the audience today, I wanted to stress that we can all collaborate on these types of activities together while still ensuring that we have full compliance with different laws and regulations and the relevant competition law stipulations. I know this has been an ongoing area of concern for some of our compliance colleagues internally, but we can overcome that. The added benefit of the activity is that it will be complementary to the existing FPA principles and will provide that practical guidance to industry on the application rather than duplicating them. And again, this is a question that, consequently we do receive within our internal companies about how, to avoid that duplication. And for the community, patient community in the audience today, the end result of this project may not mean identical rates across all the industry. Current differences between companies will exist, but also regarding the different countries of origin, and that may continue to exist as well. But on my final point, I would really encourage everyone to participate in the consultation. It's really important that you provide your view, whether you're from industry, another stakeholder group, or from the patient community. We really need to make sure that we get your voice into this consultation, but also please reach out to your internal stakeholders as well to get their voice as well. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Mark, my colleague in UPATI. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you. I'm Mark van Griggen. I'm a landscape architect, and I'm still practicing. In fact, I'm still practicing full time. So most of these activities as a patient representative, I'm doing during work time, but free. Not necessarily all, but a lot of these. And this is perhaps at the start of where I want to go. I'm trying to represent UPATI. That's a fantastic organization you all know about. Many of you are members of it. And UPATI really got me quite heavily stimulated to become more active than I already was or tried to be in patient representation. More on the side of research so far, but in the context of the UPATI course, very much in the relationship of medicine development, so working towards industry and pharmacy. Now, it is my view that patient involvement has actually come quite a long way. Because back in the olden days, as you say here, patients had no say, but they also didn't demand the say. We were passive. We thought the doctor sat up there, shining down on us with his or her wisdom, and we just followed her or his advice. We didn't demand influence on this. We didn't have any influence on it. We did have no say. That has changed. That's changing very rapidly, in fact. Many patient organizations claiming that involvement. There are, however, very significant differences again, and still across the globe, in terms of the extent to which patients may have a say. The first development of patient say was really to get more closely associated with scientists. Patient and public engagement or involvement in research projects are an example of that. But are they truly involved to a wholesome extent? 2 days a year for a project that has maybe 5 professionals working on it full time? Is that truly full engagement? I don't think so, not yet. So we are working towards patients as partners, or scientists as partners to patients, or industry as partners to patients, etc. So to some extent, these problems are history, but I also think there's still quite a lot to be done. So what does this mean for the topic we're talking about today? Fair market value. Are we moving in the right direction for that? There is great differences already. There are some countries where already a level of remuneration is available for patients or non-experts. There are other countries where that is definitely not the case. I have raised the issue in several PPI contexts because I do agree with the concept that lies behind it, that there is a lot of work to be done on this. But there are many pitfalls, obstacles, bear traps, and even dinosaurs who lie in our path to prevent this from happening. I was very glad that Karunas again mentioned the fact that he's also a lawyer. Not because we want to turn this into a legal fight or argument, but it emphasizes the need to be quite precise about what we mean, to define quite clearly what meaning we give to a certain term, so as equality. What does that mean in the context of fair remuneration? What is fair? Is fair the same as same amount, or is fair a relative term? And if it is a relative term, how do we define it? So I am one who wants to embrace meaningful involvement. I want to stimulate meaningful involvement. And in respect of achieving ultimately, based on principles, fair market value remuneration, that's a very good point. The key, however, underpinning this are the principles. And I like the principles. It's a right. It's not something that we have to ask for, it's a right. It's got to be fair, I've raised it already. It must be non-discriminative. It must demonstrate and show and be based on respect. It must be consistent and transparent. Those, I think, are the qualitative aspects particularly. But there are some more which have more to do with the practical aspects of achieving fair remuneration. Could I go to the next slide, please? So another way of looking at that is, of course, very simple, very straightforward. Well, if you do the same job, then you should have the same pay, shouldn't you? Even if you do the same job in different countries, should you not have the same pay? No, it's not that simple. There is an argument to be made for that on its most basic level, but as soon as you dive into this, it becomes patently obvious that this is too simplistic a way of looking at it. Because it doesn't take account of differences that may occur for people involved in this process. And the differences will ultimately also need to be defined and clarified and worked through. More importantly even is that unless a mechanism has been developed that is built on wide consensus and very precisely defined, only then, I believe, can it be more globally accepted. And that, I understand, is the pinnacle, one of the main objectives, of course, of this project, to agree global principles. So we cannot compare apples and pears, and certainly not apples and beetles. That just doesn't work. So comparing remuneration in Europe may be already very different from remuneration in the States or Canada or in Latin America or in Africa. But already alluded to by the previous speaker, Kay, we all need to be taken very seriously. We all need to have an equal say. We need to be respected in our views, and we need to build confidence in the patient community particularly, I think, to reinforce our ability and certainly our desire to be involved in this, not to be silent. So how ultimately do we value our input? Well, I can tell you valuing landscapes is one of the most difficult things of my profession, because how you look at a tree in the landscape will be completely different from how I look at the tree, and what it means to you may be completely different from what it means to me. I do this comparison because it's actually not fundamentally that different in terms of how you look at valuing patient involvement, or how one values the commitment of industry to be have patients involved. So we must understand these differences. And we must also present evidence that demonstrates that meaningful involvement of patient organizations is worth a lot. And we need to do so honestly. But there are a couple of bear traps still on my way, because have I got the same resources to actually fulfill these roles? No, not necessarily. If not, how do we facilitate those resources? And is it not the case that occasionally we've been thrown in the deep end too much, that's a risk, because a lot of us have no formal training. I am very grateful for the formal training I had with GPATI, but a lot of patient representatives may not have formal training. So that puts the equality issue at the front of it. So all of this will take time. And we know that Rome wasn't built on one day, because it took considerable thinking about how they were going to build the Colosseum and other places. The Colosseum, of course, being Roman times. It takes time. And I think the time taken to date to set out the principles, to emphasize the need for clear definitions is very important and very worthwhile. So I would strongly encourage all of you who are on this call to take part in the consultation, because we need to move forward as widely informed from as many sides as possible. So join the consultation yourself, promote the consultation amongst your colleagues, friends, you name it, and hang on in there, because in the end we'll get there. And I will leave it to Laura to take over from here.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and just congratulations to the speakers that have gone before. This is a very complex subject, and I'm saying that to you from the basis that many of you will know me because of my former position with Novartis as the head of patient engagement. But prior to that, I've spent over 30 years of my career in the human resources field. So compensation and remuneration were a very critical part of my role. So in some form, two of my passions have come together with this project. My passion for patient engagement. I left the industry and have since, in addition to supporting the Synergist, taken on the chair position of a patient organization in neonatal care. But my passion for using data and evidence to ensure that the right thing happens in terms of payment has always been one of my key agenda items as a HR person. Back in those days, the issues were around gender equality, other different issues to do with diversity and inclusion. And now we're right back into this highly emotional subject around the remuneration of the patient community for interactions with the industry. I have to say, in spite of the many years that I have spent working on this, the complexity of this subject, particularly in the field of patient engagement, has actually been a little bit of a shock to me. And it's because of the intensity of public scrutiny in the area, the different views and opinions of trade associations that govern the industry with codes of conduct across the world, and of course, the huge complexity that goes with multi-country. Without the great work that has already gone before, and Sarunas had gone through all of that detail, this project would probably take many years to complete. We are optimistic that building on the strength of the great work that has gone beforehand, that we will come to a full end of the project sometime in 2022. Now, that may sound very long to everyone that's on the call, because it's very clear from the great questions that we're getting and from the interactions that we've had so far in the project, that this is a subject that is currently a hurdle, an obstacle, and also an emotional feeling, because people at different stages are feeling disrespected. And that's not where we want to be as patient engagement evolves into 2022, 2023 and beyond. But we are taking our time. We are taking it step by step. very methodically, very rigorously. We're working with many of the constituents, including the trade associations, to ensure that when we get to the final hurdle of delivery, that we will have created the process, the principles, the methodology, and partnered with the right partners on market data to ensure that we satisfy this multi-stakeholder group. But I'm super, super pleased that I get to introduce to you and talk to you about the process that allows you to have your voice heard. In some of our answers to the Q&As that you've posted so far, we said you're going to have a chance to give us your views, you're going to have a chance to give us your comments. You know, we've worked together as a core team and with our really, really competent steering committee representing all of the different constituents and multiple countries, but we want to hear your opinion. So my job today, and I will go slowly, so please, my other colleagues will monitor the chat and pick up any questions if it's not clear enough. Let me move to the next slide and describe to you the consultation process. And I think it would be unforgivable of me not to call out the PFMD team and the support that they get from the synergist. Everything that we deliver through the PFMD organization and supported by the synergist has such a comprehensive public consultation process behind it. Very well articulated with a global reach in order that as many people as possible on key elements that matter to patient engagement have an opportunity to express their opinion. So firstly, the process will run from the 7th of October. So we will go live today. We will launch today at the PEOF, and it will run until the 1st of November. That means you need to start now. Now, there are two ways to provide your contribution. I'm going to take the easier one first, which is as an individual. We will launch the consultation process. Everyone will have access to it, and we will ask people in that consultation process to review the document that Sarunas has walked us through, and then they can respond through a survey. The other one, which is very critical, is an organizational response. And when we say organization, we refer to the patient community, patient organizations, and to the industry companies. What we're trying to avoid is that we get multiple organizational responses from, let's say, a single company in the industry, where perhaps the people responding have not connected themselves internally. That will lead to frustration as we move through the process, and it will create opportunities where further alignment will be needed, which means that the process doesn't flow as smoothly as we would like. So for those industry partners who are with us today, we would ask that you really get together at an organizational level with the key stakeholders that have a vested interest in this subject. There are possibly more patient engagement players from the industry here than perhaps legal and compliance colleagues from the same companies. This is a really big ask to try and bring all of those constituents together to go through an organizational consultation process. I'm going to take you through the toolkit, but you will receive a link that will get you into the toolkit. And what is in the toolkit will be this set of global principles. And Mark, I'm glad you commented on the fact that Sarunas is a lawyer, because this was a critical part of getting the language correct that would satisfy all the stakeholders. By the way, Mark, I am in desperate need of someone to help me with some things with my house, so I might be giving you a call after this and tapping into your expertise. But until you get the global principles, and then you will get an instruction to the organization level on the global principles. So you'll have documents that will help you send out the instructions to others to participate in the organizational level consultation. And these documents are similar for patient organizations and for the companies. Everything has been standardized. There's no different processes suggested. All stakeholders are asked to follow the same consultation process. There will be a report template that will allow you to consolidate the feedback and provide you with a way of reporting it back, so that you don't need to worry about how am I going to report this back? How shall I fill in? What document will I use? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it a Word document? The document will be provided for you. There is a slide deck, a comprehensive slide deck that has speaker notes to it, that will help you introduce the subject to your constituents. And it may be that you want to add some slides to that makes it a little bit more unique for your organization, but the core of what you need to know to do the consultation is available. Another critical element, and several people have mentioned this already during the course of this presentation, is the consensus document. The consensus document will outline to you critical points that different stakeholders have brought to the table during the drafting process of the principles. And it then shows you where the core team have landed after consideration of those comments and the reason why. So if you, for example, are the facilitator of your organization's consultation, that would be a really critical document for you to read and understand before you go into that consultation design. And then finally, a recording from today's session. So that is the toolkit for the public consultation process. And I think one of the things that we'll talk about in a little while, and maybe just to prompt your thinking about it now, is this enough? So we will get to a question, and just to prompt your thinking to say, is there anything more that you might need to make this a really great consultation process? So if we could go to the next slide, please. What we want to do is make sure that you know where everything is. So I think it was on this session, or maybe it was on the MedTech session earlier, but we heard a lot about sign-ups. And for those of you who haven't been introduced to sign-ups, it is the how would I say, I want to pick a document that isn't culturally insensitive, but it is the greatest roadmap of everything on patient engagement. So if you haven't got introduced to sign-ups, please get introduced to it for the purposes of the toolkit. So it will be available on sign-ups, both the organizational level and the individual level. I feel like going go sign-ups at this point, because I'm a very avid user of that particular platform. So if we could go to the next slide, please. As I said, we want to hear from you. At the end of the day, when we finish this project, we will have a set of global principles. We will have a methodology that has been defined and created that will look at activities that drive a discussion around market value, the types of participants that are needed to perform that activity, and what is the level of expertise and the expertise that's required to perform these activities. All of that will form the methodology. So the principles, the methodology, these are the two critical elements that without them, we don't get to the calculation of a fair market value. So please, we've done our best to provide you with everything that we believe is critical to do the consultation. But again, have your voice heard. Your voice matters, you matter, in order that we build again on the absolutely fantastic materials that we have so far, but to create a globally harmonized approach. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Your inputs today are going to help us as well. So we're going to have a little bit of a live session through Slido. It's best for this exercise, if you can, to use your mobile phone. So I'm going to pause a little moment to give everybody a chance to get onto this. If you could go to slido.com and enter the code hashtag PEOF 2021. And we'll take a little moment. We've got some people, our technical geniuses behind the scene are just waiting to let you go on. And I'm going to do the hashtag one more time, because I'm seeing that people sometimes are struggling with the size of our slides. So maybe you're following this on a smaller device. So it's slido.com. And I see that it's happening. Hashtag PEOF 21. So I see 6 people are on. We have 100 people as participants. So let's wait for the numbers. And what we want, easy question, I hope, starting off easy. Do you think the global principles will be useful in your day-to-day work? So we've got 16 people answering. I'm going to cut off the Slido when we get past 50. So let's, I feel as if I'm a kind of game, one of those TV game hosts at the moment. Come on, you can do it. Let's get going. At the halfway mark to close down Slido. Good to see that people are curious about the final product. "29 people. 5 people have dropped off. Maybe they don't like Slido.
Laura, if I may, while we are waiting for answers, we could review again, remind that we try to answer the Q&A as fast as we can. So you can look into these parts of unanswered questions where we try to provide the reasoning. And it's also, I see that you are quite active in the chat. But what I see is, in general, just to react, that a lot of you are asking, so what about the situation where you are living in one country, providing services in different country? So that is covered in global principles. As you see, the links have been sent out to you. So open up and see, if you have some immediate thoughts, we'll still be able to answer them in Q&A, but you will be welcome to contribute to the public consultation. Also, when you are saying, so how to define the values, to see what expertise is required, again, just to step back a bit, today the public consultation is on the global principles. That part of what is the expertise, type of activities, what is the fair market value rate is not a discussion for today. We are saying it is part of a project. This is what Laura said is within the scope, and there will be a public consultation on that, but we'll be able to go to that stage after we are aligning on the global principles. So I took a bit of a time. We have 41
thank
here.
Thank you for that, Srunas. I think we'll close. I think our 50 people mark might have been a bit ambitious, and the longer I wait, the more people are leaving the call. So let's move to the second one. So, which of the following tools allow you to better participate and engage your network in a public consultation? So this is where we really want to get your feedback. We have a consultation survey, the instructions on who to engage internally, the template email, slides, video explaining the project, consensus document. So which of the following tools allow you to better participate? We probably should have had one all of the above, but now we're asking you to choose. And maybe if there's something, we're coming to that question. Okay. Okay, thanks for that. So a video explaining the project and the consultation. So we'll make sure that this recording will go out on time, but we may also just play back the recording, see if we do some edits and get it joined up, and the email. And it's great to see the consensus document coming through. We thought that this was a great piece of work that helped us. Okay, so let's go to the next question then. As we progress this project, what else do you need? So this is open, you can type in the words. Is there anything else that you would need? Okay, you can see that time is a big constraint. Social media posts to share, that could be one that we can take. More meetings like this. FPS support, just that you're aware, and I think Nicole may have mentioned it at the beginning, we will be working with the FPA Patient Think Tank and the FPA Legal Ethics and Compliance Committee, so that is still to happen. We're also working with IPMA. Let's see, benchmarking. Benchmarking will be absolutely critical in terms of the creation of the market value. And we will be here for you. So please, we'll consolidate this slide and talk through ourselves what we can get out to you very quickly. But please know that as a project team, we are available. So please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. You got all of our contact details in the emails, but please reach out to us and we will bring all of the issues into the project steering committee. And where we can deal with it quickly, we will deal with it quickly. If it takes a little bit longer, we will be sure to get back to you and let you know that. But this is very helpful. Thank you. And if we could go to the next question, can you just give us one word that describes how you feel about this project? One word. Excited, overwhelmed, I can empathize with that. Intrigued, interested, inspired, critical, precious, overdue, bewildered. Okay, so please, I've just answered tutor on the chat. Please, if you're feeling overwhelmed, bewildered, we're here to support you. We'll help you with the guidance. Please don't hesitate to reach out. It's easy for us in the project steering committee to be working and trying to get the deliverables to you, but we know and appreciate, I think both Serenas, Nicole, Sylvia, myself, certainly Mark and Kay, we've all been on the receiving end of here's something that we need you to do. We've been passionate about it. We felt that it's been really important, but when we look at our schedules, we do feel overwhelmed. We do wonder how we're going to do it. So please, if you're feeling like that, reach out, share it with us. We will do our very, very best to support you through this journey. The consultation process is critical and is part of the DNA of how we work together through PFMD, EPF. It's what, and UPATI, it's what the Patient Engagement Open Forum is all about. We're here to support and to help. Please don't hesitate to reach out. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I want to hand over to Nicole, who is our program lead on this very important project. And I'd like to thank you for participating in our Slido. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for your really insightful inputs into the Slido activity. Great to see hopeful coming through as one of the leading words from today. On a final note, I really just want to echo what Laura has shared. We really need your help, not only for the success of the work of this project, but really to drive change that's needed in patient engagement to really institutionalize equitable remuneration. So please take part in the public consultation. Watch out for future public consultations to come and reach out to us if you'd like to stay informed as this project progresses. As Laura said, we're really here to support you. This is engaging really broadly is going to be a key driver here. So we are here to help. So we're excited to be working together and delivering this important piece of work. And we really look forward to receiving your insights from your organizations, from your colleagues, and from people in your networks. So on behalf of the Project Steering Committee, the PFMD team, thank you so much for your time today. Take care and have a really nice evening. Thank you.